U Break Wheel Fix is a wheel repair and remanufacturing company with over 20 years of experience. They specialize in complete wheel repair, repairing wheels from curb rash, bends, and cracks. They also specialize in refinishing from polishing, machining, and custom colors that will suit your car's needs. Lastly, U Break Wheel Fix offers a full array of factory and custom wheel and tire applications. Contact them at 305-748-0112. That's 305-748-0112 or at You Break Wheel Fix on all social platforms. This show is brought to you by Lewis Peters State Farm, agency representing the #1 auto and home insurer in the United States for more than 60 years combined experience in the insurance industry. Local agents that understand South Florida's unique market. You have access to them 24/7, walk in, call in, click in through lewispeters.com. You can find them online on social media at SF Agent Peters, or you can call at 305-275-5585. Remember, lewispeters.com. This show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a revolutionary new daily fantasy game whereby you pick 2, 3, or 4 players to go over or under their fantasy point projections, and if you're correct, you win. Pick 2 or more players from the same sport or league, or go cross leagues for your parlay. Use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, 5, and receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. But first, sign up at prizepicks.com to start winning today.
Welcome to 3 Yards Per Carry, a podcast covering the Miami Dolphins and the NFL. Now, here's your hosts, Chris, Alf, and Simon.
And we're on, and welcome to 3 Yards Per Carry. I'm Alfredo Arteaga. Simon Clancy is here. Chris Kaufman is here. And what you just heard was audio from the 7th Ring of Hell that Chris Kaufman recorded on, what was it, Saturday?
Also known as Tampa.
Well, Raymond James Stadium, or whatever that section was.
AKA the hottest stadium on earth.
So how did that come about, Chris? Everybody just heard the audio. How did that come about? This guy's a national treasure, evidently.
He is a national treasure. This is performance art. Unfortunately, I had to sit next to this guy, and he was like humongous. He was a 300-pound, just very large, very tall human. And so, like, obviously he's invading my chair space quite a bit. And you know, in addition to that, he's just talking, constantly shouting onto the field, just everything. He's absolutely the fan that knows who exactly he wants to see to get the ball every single play, calls the fumble every single play, whether there's a fumble or not. You know, just he's like saying ball out like 1 second into every play. Like every time the quarterback like drops back to pass or something like that, he's like ball out, ball out, ball out. He's just one of those guys. It's like the most annoying, and yet like it was definitely like I kind of appreciated how bad it was. That just had to sit back. But
I rather enjoyed that he thought that there's like some type of, you know, fraternal order of zebras everywhere, or people with stripes, right?
Striped animals, and they all agree that these refs are the worst.
Okay. Were they the worst? Were there some bad calls being made at that moment?
No, it was just normal. There was like maybe one that I was like, oh, that was really questionable.
We should get the ball out guy on to do our adverts for Manscaped.
We just need to take the clip and just like keep playing it over and over, like in between our lines when we're talking about Manscaped. Ball out.
Manscaped, whoever is their rep for them, probably just thought it was 3 idiots just doing this trial. Now we've got a hype man who can actually come in and sell this shit.
Hype man.
Man.
This guy was great. This guy, like it's been shared around, like Mina Kimes. I tagged Mina Kimes in it because I just wanted to see her just laugh like uproariously in his face and just not even be able to say anything if they tried to debate on anything like pies or anything. You know, It's just, and she replied back, and other people are like tagging Le Batard show on it and stuff like that. It's pretty funny. It's this guy was superb.
But you're not telling everybody the whole picture. Like, this is nobody has video of this, although you've posted it, so they could go to your Twitter account to see it. But the guy has an Eric Rhett jersey, and it's a throwback Eric Rhett jersey.
Definitely, it's a creamsicle Eric. Well, is there any other Eric Rhett jersey? I don't think he survived. I don't think he survived to the pewter power.
Really?
No, I don't think so.
That's a good callback.
So all Eric Rhett jerseys are definitely the creamsicle throwbacks, and he stripped the sleeves down as well as like the end of the shirt, like the bottom of the shirt. He like stripped them into like Ultimate Warrior style like fringes. And I mean, this guy was just I joked about it. I bet when he gets to the stadium, he hits like a special dance like Ray Lewis does when he does the squirrel when he gets on the field. Yeah. Like he's just that excited. And then he goes out there and just berates the refs for.
Well, it's a miracle he's alive after his team had just won a Super Bowl, right? Like,
or after that much drinking, because there was a lot.
Yeah, but what a celebration this guy must have had.
No.
In February.
Do you think he remembers? Do you think he remembers like that entire month?
No, not a chance.
He can't. There's no way.
Not a chance. He just has vague memories of a touchdown pass here or there, or a play that was made here or there.
Yeah, like he knows that they won the Super Bowl, and that's all.
Yes, he might not even know the opponents, but he knows that they won.
He knows.
Well, speaking of Super Bowls, Dolphins seem to have played in one on Saturday because everybody's lost their minds on Twitter.
And we lost. We lost it, by the way.
Yes, we did. We
lost the Super Bowl.
Can I ask a genuine question? Why do you think so many people get sandy vaginas about like the media saying something? Or I find it hilarious that people are so caught up in like, oh, then somebody said this about Justin Fields, but they didn't say it about Tua, and somebody did this, and it's just like.
Well, I'm more talking about the fans.
People
because this is all the reaction that I've heard is the fans being like,
But that's what I mean. It's like fans like it's come on, like I don't know. Maybe it's the off season. Everybody's excited.
I think
people have been locked up in their houses for 18 months. But it's like fucking hell, calm down. Who gives a fuck?
I think people are married to their phones, and they're just scouring for content, and then all the content that they look for is the negative stuff that riles them up.
But it's like
Tua is intentional.
Tua is either going to be good or he isn't, and if he's good, then it's fine, and if he isn't, then so be it. But ultimately, the field will decide. Do you know what I mean? He will, and if he's great, amazing, and if he's not, well, then we move on. But it's just like this whole kind of he said, she said, my dad's bigger than your dad, my dick's bigger than your dick. It's just like there's such a tiresome pissing competition. It's like, oh, Justin Fields got 3 centimeters longer in the Chicago Tribune than he did in the Miami Herald. And it's just like nobody gives a fuck. Like nobody gives a fuck. It's just
who gives a fuck? Angry Bucks fan guy.
Well, yeah, ball
out.
Yeah, but like
there's nothing in the flat, nothing in
the middle, nothing in the flat.
Wow, man, that's really good defense, is what I would say.
That would make a really good, like hip hop, like a hook. Yes. Nothing in the middle, nothing in the flat.
I'd love to hear you do it, Chris.
And put me on auto tune, like give me nothing in the middle, nothing in the flat, and just shout out Poindexters.
I've always thought you were the Nas of this group, this triumvirate.
Clearly.
I always thought you were kind of
more like a little Nas X.
Yeah, you were like a lost member of Public Enemy, or were you on the Defiant Ones? I'm pretty sure I saw you.
Oh man, well, I guess we have to talk about this game, right?
Do we? Because everybody's just still.
I'm ready to go. I've got dinner.
Well, I guess we can start with the quarterbacks, right? Tua Tagovailoa, I thought he was good. He had that one mistake, but overall, your impressions of what he did on Saturday, I thought, I enjoyed very much watching him play on Saturday. I thought he was very, very good, except for that one play. Your thoughts, Simon?
Yeah, I enjoyed watching him. I thought a few things actually. I thought rhythm. He looked rhythmically much better. He looked much sounder. He looked like he understood where the ball was going on every single snap. He just looked in charge. He looks totally different. He looks different physically. but he looks like he's in charge. He understands where the football needs to go, and I thought that was really important. And the second thing is the accuracy. You know, you can't knock the accuracy. I mean, his arm isn't ever going to be the strongest in the league. You know, it's moderate to good. And sometimes it shows up just a little bit that it's not quite at the upper echelon that you'd really love it. But my goodness, the accuracy is, you know, the completion to Matt Collins between two defenders was a really good throw. But the throw that stood out for me actually was the short throw to Mike Gesicki on 3rd and 4 or 3rd and 6. And it was in literally the only place that Gesicki could catch it. It was a sort of a down to Gesicki's left with a defender draped all over him. And the defender's hand must have been, you know, millimeters away from the ball, but it was so beautifully feathered in that it was only the place where Gesicki could catch it. So I think ultimately, I thought he played well. I don't have a problem with him throwing the interception. I actually would have liked, you know, there were lots of people going, it was Adam Shaheen's fault. It's not to, you know, there's a little bit of it being Shaheen. You'd like to see him work back to the ball, but you know, sometimes you just got, it's okay for Tua to make a mistake, people. It's like, Don't worry too much. But I'd much rather him be aggressive and get that throw out of his system and go and look at it on film and think, okay, I need to just be a beat quicker, because Shaheen's open, a beat quicker and it gets there. But I don't have an issue with that interception at all. And Shaheen, if he doesn't stop, if he just works back to the ball just a tiny bit, it's a touchdown. And then, you know, I mean, in a way, it's quite good that he didn't throw the touchdown, because I just think the amount of spunk that Miami fans would be chucking all over the internet would have been, you know, it would have drowned in it. You know, first regular season game, first preseason game and all. But yeah, I thought it was very encouraging. It was there were a number of encouraging things that I saw and a number of slightly more discouraging things, and that was certainly in the encouraging in tray.
Chris.
Yeah, so the Shaheen thing, I don't really care what Shaheen was doing. You know, maybe if we're grading Shaheen, we'll be like, you know, hey, you could have been a little bit better about that. Was a mistake on Tua's part. Do
you think if he was vaccinated, he'd have caught it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think if it was definitely if he would come back for the ball like he comes back for another Facebook post from Ben Shapiro, then yeah, he would have maybe.
Well, I can make a case if he wasn't, you know, if he announced to everybody that he wasn't vaccinated, maybe they don't get as close to him and to pick off that ball. You know what I mean? And maybe he could catch it for a touchdown.
I don't know. I just don't see putting it on him. I think that's, you know, whatever. And so, you know, it's not something that I'm going to consider. He was late and over the middle, like in the end zone. I mean, come on, you can't do that. I mean, it's stupid. So, but yeah, otherwise he did have a good game. Something that I wonder sometimes about a pass like that with the interception is not only was he late and over the middle and you can't do that, but you know, hey, was there a lot of juice on that throw? You know, did that factor into the fact that the guy could cross, you know, because he crossed zones, right? He crossed from the other side of the hash to get over there and rob it. Like, and sometimes that's a matter of timing. Like, you know, can you squeeze it in there before that guy can quite get there? And that's where we talk about sometimes the arm strength, and maybe that would have factored in. I'm not actually sure. I kind of have to check for myself on those things. But yeah, otherwise, you know, really good accuracy. Like he knew where to go with the ball. He was, I mean, people, oh, he doesn't let it fly and stuff. Well, it was silly because last year he was asked to throw into tighter windows than pretty much any quarterback in the league, right? More often than any quarterback in the league. And yeah, sometimes there were times when you're like, yeah, you really needed to let that one fly and you didn't. And that's a valid criticism, but in general, like he was asked to throw into tighter windows. If there's anything discouraging, is that like we just saw more of that tighter window stuff. Like, didn't it seem like every completion, every ball he was throwing was like defender was right there.
Yeah.
Right. Really, really right there. And that still makes me wonder about the offense and the structure of the offense and what we're doing that way. But you know, at the same time, he did fit it in there, and he did, and he was aggressive that way and let his guys make a play. And so I thought he had a decent outing. It was decent because you can't throw that end zone. You can't, you know, it's not a good outing when you throw that ball in the end zone. That was his fault, and they have a pick and they lose points because of it. So, you know, decent start, not Could have been better. Definitely could have been a lot worse. I'm not gonna like sing his praises about this one. It's not a hill I'm gonna die on.
Now his completion on that out route from the right hash to the left boundary to Mac Hollins, that showed some arm strength there. Like that's actual arm strength. That's an NFL throw. And I was very encouraged with everything that he did, except for that one play. But I don't know where his read was starting because his head looks like he's looking down the hash, and he's looking down the hash. Adam Shaheen is wide open once he clears the linebackers, and the linebackers are actually leaving him. So, because he's looking them off. So I don't know. I don't know what he was looking at on that play, but yeah, he came back to it late, intercepted. That's not good. I think he'll fix that because it's true what Simon said. The worst thing that could happen there is that he completes it and then he thinks nothing was wrong with what he did. But moving on with the rest of the offense, and then I know what we're gonna get to eventually. People, we're not gonna ignore these guys. But let's talk about the skill guys. I don't think we could talk too much about wide receivers because it was essentially just Mac Hollins and Lynn Bowden, since Devontae Parker didn't play, Albert Wilson didn't play, Jalen Waddle didn't get a target, although he had a nice punt return, and Will Fuller is still training for the Tour de France. So I don't think we could.
He's, unless he's training for next year's Tour de France. I mean, he's probably more likely to be in the Tour de France before he actually plays an NFL game again.
So I don't know if we could talk about too much about the wide receivers. I guess Mac Hollins, okay, yeah, he was good. All right, and Lynn Bowden made some catches for the second team. Gesicki looks fantastic. But I guess we could talk a little bit about the running backs.
Simon, I think the receivers, I mean, you have to talk about them because, like, first off, like, look at the plays and look at how the Bears had to play us. I mean, we don't have Devontae Parker out there and we don't have Will Fuller. Instead, we have Mac Hollins and Jakeem Grant, which is like, very poor man's Devontae Parker and Will Fuller.
It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito in Twins.
So I mean, so it's a poor man's substitute, but it's still structurally it's the same. Like Mac Hollins is a bigger, kind of a jump ball kind of dude, and Jakeem Grant very fast. That's what like Will Fuller is, and then Jalen Waddle in the middle. So structurally they had a sort of somewhat similar, but obviously not the same cast. And look at, for example, on that third down play, that the big one to Mike Gesicki, right? The big catch and run that he had over Alex Ogletree. You look at how the Bears played them on this 3rd and 4. This is like 3rd and 4. Where are the safeties on the? I mean, I can still count. I see 9 players at the line of scrimmage, and that means there are 2. I think you got 11 men in football. That means there are 2 that aren't within like 12 yards or 15 yards of the line of scrimmage. They're back deep on a 3rd and 4, and what that meant is like a lot of room underneath for Mike Gesicki to run an over route against Alex Ogletree by himself. And that was how they covered. That was how they had to cover one of the top tight ends in the NFL. He is going to be one of the top 5 tight ends in the NFL. So I brought this up on a show a couple of weeks ago or whatever. Like the guy who's going to eat here because of Jalen Waddle and the way this new offense is structured is definitely Mike Gesicki. They can't play him the same way that they used to because they can't afford to. If you have Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle off to one side with Jalen in the slot, it's not the same. You just can't play Gesicki the same way. The numbers and the spacing don't work out. The manning doesn't work out. So that big play, there was a reason. And that's what I took from it from the skill position and the cast and the way it's structured, and even with guys that aren't even present on the field, you can feel it. And so that's what I take.
And as far as the running backs, anything you guys want to add to that? Because I thought Salvon Ahmed kind of, I wouldn't call it a coming out party, but it's kind of obvious he's going to be a big part of this offense. He does so many things well. He catches the ball just as good as Myles Gaskin does, and he seems to have a little bit more, I wouldn't call it oomph, but he gets out there and he's fast. He's just faster than Myles Gaskin. I think he's a major part of the offense. I don't know if you saw anything different, Simon, with the rest of the running backs.
No, I mean, Chris actually made the point on OnlyFins about Malcolm Brown, because watching it did look like watching Jordan Howard all over again. It certainly wasn't the Malcolm Brown that I saw at the Rams. Obviously, he wasn't helped by the offensive line. I quite like Myles Gaskin, and I know Chris doesn't, but I felt like he left a few yards on the field. But I like Ahmed; he's a good player. But what I do think, and we'll get to it with the offensive line as well, I think these are the two critical areas that are really going to be kibosh the Dolphins' hopes. I just don't think the offensive line or the running game is strong enough for this team to go deep into the playoffs. I just don't think they have the horses on in either unit, and it's disappointing to look at the situation with the draft picks that Miami have had over the last few years and the way they've positioned themselves, because they've continually ignored the running back position for whatever reason. But, you look around and you see that Jonathan Taylor looks like the best player in the Colts team this offseason. You look like J.K. Dobbins is having a great camp. You look at, some of the players other players they passed on last year and draft picks this year. So Javonte Williams' first 2 carries for the Broncos both went for first downs. He's had a great camp. And you just think, the opportunity was there to do something about that position. It's the same with the offensive line, and we'll get to it in a minute, but it doesn't feel like we've got any better on the offensive line. Well, I mean, it doesn't feel like we've got any better for 15 years, but realistically, it doesn't feel like we've got any better from last year. And in a way, it feels like we've actually gone backwards. But I like Ahmed. I think he's a decent player, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out because, there's a battle there. I just doesn't feel like there's necessarily there's not necessarily a bell cow, which, we seem to be lacking. And you've got this quarterback. You want him to be fantastic. You want to build around him. And yet it kind of feels like you're stymieing him at every turn because you just can't upgrade the positions that, we can't seem to find a running back and we can't seem to find offensive linemen for whatever reason.
Although I think in the red zone, these running backs will be effective catching the ball. They just don't, they're just not going to make anything on their own. At least they haven't so far in that one preseason game. And I've seen camp and it hasn't been pretty there either. So there's still time, but this leads us to the offensive line. And at first glance, it didn't look like almost anybody played well. It seems like maybe Jesse Davis played okay. Solomon Kinley was extremely average. Robert Hunt was actually good. Dieter was wallpaper. But Austin Jackson he was just bad. Like, did he do anything well? Except for he did pick up a spin move to the inside from, I believe it was a second team guy. He was wearing number 53. But other than that, what did Austin Jackson do well on Saturday, Simon?
How long have we got for me to think? I thought it was a pretty bad performance. I know Chris has seen some things that he doesn't. Look, I think we're in this kind of situation, aren't we? And it goes back to what I talked about earlier on with Tua and the kind of the Justin Fields and, my dad's bigger than your dad kind of thing. This can be one of two things, or it could be the same thing. And I think ultimately the truth lies somewhere in between, actually. We're overreacting. It was the preseason. It was game 1 of preseason with new offensive system, all sorts of different, new player next to him potentially, or at least has been with Liam Eichenberg, and Kinley comes back in, and it could be that. It could be that he's regressed. He's having a sophomore slump, and this is something to really worry about. I suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. I don't think that he's had a bad camp, but I do think there were some reps at the weekend that were pretty worrying. And I think they came both in pass pro, where he looked slow and bent at the waist. He looked cumbersome. I thought he got blown off the ball a couple of times down at the goal line on the second drive after the Mike Gesicki long pass. Malcolm Brown tried to run over the left side. He just got blown back into the backfield. I think the most worrying play was the touchdown pass to Ahmed with the on the wheel route, because he got absolutely abused. And I think if Jacoby Brissett had held the ball for a second longer, he'd have got wiped out. So, look, I think there's plenty to work with. Are we overreacting? Was the overreaction on social media too much? Probably was, actually. But it's now getting towards situation critical, because it doesn't feel to me like they're going to do anything necessarily. realistically, do any of us think that Liam Eichenberg is going to be promoted to first team left tackle? I think it's really unlikely. It just doesn't strike me as something that the Dolphins would do. But that line is a mess. It does not look good. I can't think there's many worse offensive lines in the league. And I think they have fundamentally and systematically failed to upgrade it in a way in which they should have done, both in free agency, but also in the draft. None of us liked Austin Jackson, and I'm not trying to shit on the kid, because I didn't think he was too bad last year. But he looked like Austin Jackson at USC on Sunday, and that was a concern given that he's had a year and a bit within the system. So yeah, that line is going to be a real concern. And ultimately, are you going to be able to hold? Look what happened in the Super Bowl. We saw, can you realistically, if we played Tampa Bay, could you realistically tell me that line would hold up against a Buccaneers pass rush? Because I think they'd get destroyed. Two would get destroyed, and the Dolphins would be in trouble. So a lot to concern, but caution that we're not overreacting too much, I think would be what I'd say.
Chris?
Well, let me ask you a question though. What would be more concerning for you, like between, two options here? You have a guy who's been on the team and he clearly just had probably the worst outing we've seen him have. I mean, would that be?
Yeah, it was 25 snaps, 5 pressures. He allowed 5 pressures.
Yeah. So probably the worst outing we've ever seen him have. Yes, he's in his second year, but yes, it was also literally the first action of the season, the first real action, full speed game conditions and everything. Would you be more concerned about that, or would you be more concerned about, guys who went out there and just looked like who they are and who we know them to be, and it wasn't enough? Because that's what I came away with. Like Austin Jackson, I'm almost willing to give him a pass on a pass on this first game. It was the first action of the season, first full live, game speed, everything. And yeah, he went out and had a bad showing. I don't think he showed nothing because, frankly, there were plays, there were good plays, and there was also there's aspects of his game that's like, this is who he is on run blocking. This is who he is in space. This is, he was who he is in many ways. He just also fucked it like on a couple of plays. And so, can we give him a pass for that and say, well, we've got to see more before we really hit the panic button. But at the point that I made in OnlyFans, I was like, well, but at the same time, you do kind of get the feeling that if you're too patient here and you're like, well, we're not going to start giving Liam Eichenberg some snaps at left tackle. If we don't even do that, then we could regret that down the road. We'll be like, oh, now we're scrambling to, for something, and we're not preparing. We're not proactively preparing. So I kind of agree both ways. There's some other guys on the line, this Solomon Kinley kind of was who he is. Like there's issues there, and there have been since college. Mm-hmm. There's definitely highs, there's definitely attractive qualities, but there's a lot of stuff that he, when he was making mistakes, it's like, this is part of who he is. Michael Dieter, Wallflower, this is who he is. Like, this is who he's been. You need him to be more than that. I mean, Robert Hunt was the only real, Jesse Davis, he kind of, limitations, trying to get east-west on outside zone, but looking a little bit stronger on inside zone or duo when he's able to double team people. This is who he is. And Robert Hunt was the guy that was like, well, that actually looked like a fairly good quality offensive lineman. It just seems like everything that Simon's talked about with the offensive line, it's just all coming home to roost, because you talk about guys like Austin Jackson, we wouldn't have drafted him. Right. I mean, I'm not trying to say that we should be GM of the Dolphins. I'm just saying, like, there's got to be some reason some people are like looking at him at a USC and they're like, they're really kind of concerned about him. And Solomon Kinley, you knew he had warts. There's a reason he went as low as he did, and maybe should have even gone lower. Michael Dieter, I mean, I wasn't a fan of his. I don't know how anybody else felt about it. I wasn't a fan of his coming out. Jesse Davis, we know that he's like average at best wherever you put him. and that's like on his best games he's average. On his normal game he's probably like sub average. And so all you really have to hang your hat on this offensive line is one guy, Robert Hunt, that you think might be able to play really well at right guard. And that's it. And that's fucking it. And that's awful. That's really bad to like sit here and look at that. And like, yeah, the offense might be such, the skill positions might be such, the structure, the play calling might be such that we're not seeing the weakness as much. And we're like, okay, well, we're still able to be a productive offense. And maybe they're not having their weaknesses. They can gel as a unit. They got the chemistry, all that stuff that really is just code for skill position and play callers doing a good job. Yeah, that could still definitely happen. But at the same time, you're like, well, what have you done with this unit? It's like what you've done at the running backs unit. You got Malcolm Brown, and if he wants to be Marshawn Lynch, he's got to eat a hell of a lot. He's got to eat a truckload of Skittles at this point, because like he is not. I think that, yeah, it's coming. It's really coming home to roost, the offensive line and the running back position, which I didn't get a chance to talk about before. But like Gaskin, it's not that I hate him or anything. It's just like he's very average out there. And like, you need to make plays, right? You need to make plays to win these games. Like, at some point, a defensive player is going to come at you and like make a good play, and your guy's going to have to go up against him, and he has to make a better play. And it's like, when is our guy going to make the better play? And that's what I see about the running backs unit. I only saw, Savon Ahmed looked interesting because of his speed. There were points where I thought Jordan Scarlett looked interesting because of what he could do. As a backfield, in the backfield, as a pass protector, as long as you don't throw him the ball and then brick hands show up. So I think that along those two units, the running backs and the offensive line, there's really some things that are kind of coming home here, and it's making me pretty uncomfortable.
How many of the offensive linemen would start for another team in the NFL? I think that's the ultimate question. I don't think many of them would. Maybe Hunt. I can't see anybody else start, and that's a damning indictment of how bad that line is.
Very damning.
I think Robert Hunt would, but it's let's not sell the rest of the league and their offensive lines, because offensive line play is absolutely disastrous across the league.
Definitely,
there's maybe 3 teams with good offensive line. Everybody else has essentially the same garbage we saw out there on Saturday. Not able to run outside zone. Not even. Doing we couldn't even execute split zone, and when we did our ISO blocks, that's the only thing we could do right, because all you doing is hitting a 3-tech together at the same time. And if you can't do that, you can't drive them 4 yards down the field, then you just don't belong on an NFL field. So
the thing is, as well, I mean, there's one guy on that line, Robert Hunt, that you could build around, and he's a right guard. You know what I mean? He's not a right tackle or a left tackle or a center. He's a right guard.
And you're not exactly sure that he's like, what's his name? The guy that played right guard for the Ravens for so long. Or
Marshall Yanda. He's not
Marshall Yanda. He's not exactly Marshall Yanda that you're sure yet.
So I suppose it raises the question for me. People talk about trades and stuff. At what point do the Dolphins start to, because Alf's just made the point, and we've been making it on social media the last 48, 72 hours. The line play in the league is not very good, and teams are going to be reticent to give up starting caliber offensive linemen. But at what point do you look around and think, we're not going to get anything done with this line? You look at the Bills line, you look at the Patriots line, even without Dante Scarnecchia now, they're still a quality line. You look around, even the Jets, they've made upgrades. At what point do you look around and think, we've got talent at receiver, but realistically, Devontae Parker's the only player that's going to get us any sort of return where we could, invest. We obviously have the extra draft pick the year after next. But, at what point do you look at a cornerback, Nick Needham playing really well on the outside? At what point do you look at a Byron Jones and think, maybe, would you trade Byron Jones for Eric McCoy, for example? At what point do you have to start looking at these things? Because it's so bad.
Yes, it is. I guess we could move on to the defense. And the defense gave up its first down with 27 seconds left in the first half. And the first 3 drives for Justin Fields, I know everybody's going crazy over how well Justin Fields played, and he did destroy what was essentially the third team, Dolphins. But the first 3 drives with Justin Fields, there were 3 and outs. And one of those he fumbled. And I don't know how the hell we didn't get it. But Javon Holland was diving on top of it. And somehow Justin Fields beat him to it. So I don't know. On the defensive end, I found nothing to be unhappy about, especially considering that they were sitting both corners, both ends. They limited snaps for Raekwon Davis. Very happy with the defense. Your thoughts, Simon?
Yeah, I thought the defense, especially the first team defense, played really well. I thought Nick Needham looked outstanding, frankly. I thought he played really well. Eric Rowe, a really good player. You know, that's not a surprise for anyone. You know, you worry about the lack of juice sometimes in the pass rush, but Christian Wilkins kind of takes those strides, provides a little bit of rush inside. And I thought, you know, it was interesting to get to see Noah Igbenogany. Chris talked about it on OnlyFins, and I agree with him. I thought actually he played pretty well. I thought he played pretty well. It's you know, the defense is not the question though for this team. Is that it's not too far away from being a really, really high caliber defense. But and actually, Chris mentioned in the OnlyFins chat actually the player that stood out for me was big Tyshon Render. Who actually looks like he's gone away. You know, we talked earlier on about Austin Jackson and the offensive line, how they haven't traded on. Render looks like a solid rotational piece in there now. He looks like he's filled out. He's a big, beefy human being. And I saw some nice juice from him actually. He looked like he could be a solid contributor in there. It'll be interesting to see which 5 players they dump in the next 24 hours because they've got to get down to 85. But yeah, I thought Render played well, but Nick Needham looks a really good player. And actually, I thought, you know, it seems pretty. It's going to be interesting to see where he plays because it feels like Justin Coleman's played pretty much all the snaps, you know, in the nickel in inverted commas. You know, so it will be interesting to see what happens and when, because you know Needham's a good player and he needs to be on the field. So it is going to be interesting to see what happens and how they just try and fit everybody out, how they fit all those defensive backs on the field. You know, McCourty and Holland showing up in the last 10 days. And, you know, who's going to, the Javaris Davis, who played pretty well. You know, where are they going to play all these kids?
Even though Noah Igbenogany got into the act and made a play.
Right.
Yeah.
He made a couple. Well. He made several.
Yeah.
He made several plays.
But what I'm really, really interested in, and I'll ask you, Chris, and then you could go on with whatever you want to talk about as far as the secondary, but Justin Coleman, Nick Needham, like this is a real competition for snaps, right?
Yeah.
Because if a team is going to keep us in, like if a team is going to run 12 personnel out there, I don't think we're going to get into too much time, which means it's one or the other, right? We're not going to sit Byron Jones or Xavier Howard. Those guys are going to play every single snap. And you got to figure that Eric Rowe is going to play pretty much every snap. So what do these guys figure in? Because I love what both guys did. First of all, Nick Needham was spectacular in coverage, and Justin Coleman was coming in hot and laying some licks, playing physically. And I don't know, I like both, but what do you see on it?
Nick Needham and Justin Coleman is like where competition goes right. You know, this is why coaches like go to the cliche all the time. You know, they get these guys competing with each other and they both sort of, you know, elevate. And I mean, because obviously Nick Needham was making plays during the game, but Justin Coleman had at least one really good play himself. And you know, this is the competition. So it sort of beggared belief, everything that we were hearing about the secondary in camp, and how many big plays and the offense was making and the wide receivers and stuff like that. Because even without Xavier Howard there, you're still talking about Byron Jones, who we know is really good and can play. You're still talking about Nick Needham, who we see, you know, right here on the field when like he's really good. Justin Coleman is competing really heavily and that's hot. And I think both players are good. Noah Igbenogany, I don't think he suddenly forgot how to play football and became even worse than he was at Auburn for some reason. You know, and then you stick in Jason McCourty, who starts coming down to the outside. because Javon Holland is playing more deep center field now. And so Jason McCourty, I mean, this guy has been in the league for a long time. We know he can play. He played really well at various stops on the outside as a corner. You got all these players that can play. And then you got all these reports of like, oh, the secondary is being abused. And thank God we got Xavier Howard back and stuff like that. That's why I said before the game, I was like, hey, pay attention not just to the wide receivers, and whether we're making explosive passing plays, but also pay attention to that secondary and see if they're holding their own. Because if they're holding their own, then it's sort of a notch in favor of the wide receivers and the passing offense and Tua and what they were doing in camp. Because I don't think these guys just like suddenly, these guys in the secondary just all of a sudden became terrible. And sure enough, we get on the actual football field, actual game, they're not terrible. And we saw that. So we have good competition. We have good depth there. Javaris Davis really stood out to me. As far as depth goes, look at where he played and when he played during that game. He was high in the rotation, and I think that bodes well for him. And then you go up front, and I think that some other guys that like Simon said with Tyson Render, I mean, he just looked like an NFLer. Right.
Yeah.
And it was very different from what from what I anyway personally had thought about him last year. There's some guys back there that are worth watching. Jonathan Ledbetter showed up. I mean, I don't know if anybody was watching him, but he really, I mean, he looks like he belongs in this defense, and he plays well in it. Every now and then there might be a play that's like maybe a little bit more from him on that, but he played well. I thought that for somehow Clayton Fajetelem actually had played well, which was a little weird. But all the power to him. Second year in the system, maybe it just makes more sense to him now, and he's just more confident and letting his ability to take over. And I hope that he is that kind of player. Shaquem Griffin was the guy that poked that ball out that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. Justin Fields out to the sideline. Shaquem Griffin snuck up with him and poked the ball out with his one and only hand. and that was a really good play. He was a spark plug. So there's some really good stuff out there with the wide receiver, or not the defensive backs and the defensive players in general, all through the depth chart. I think it's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, and Jalen Phillips was not in uniform, which was odd because he practiced all week and he hit people all week, but they held him out of the game. They're doing something with him. I think they have him on some type of pitch count where they don't want to play him until they do play him, because he is number one on the depth chart. One guy that I'll it's going to be two guys. I'm going to point out two guys that I thought disappointed: Jason Strowbridge and Benito Jones. Benito Jones was essentially like useless. Like he played some snaps, especially on third team, and didn't do much. So, and he's a guy who always looks good in camp, and Strowbridge had been coming on in camp. But I agree with you. Tyson Render, for a couple of years now, he looks the part, right? He's a great athlete. Long, lean. Maybe now is when he could maybe grab a roster spot, although it's going to be tight. But I was extremely impressed with the entire defense until those third teamers came on, and Game Pass is not giving us all 22 yet, and I don't think they will for like the first 4 weeks of the season.
Crazy.
They're having some type of rebuild on their website.
So pissed off about that, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's and their whole site is a mess. It's a disaster. But I would love to know who blew that coverage on Jesse James. But we won't know for now. Brian Flores says he was going to look into it.
It's either Duke Riley or the defensive back who's I'm now forgetting his name. But
by the way, throw him on the list of guys that didn't impress. Duke Riley was not very good in this game.
Except PFF thought he was just wilding out there for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know what they watched.
They gave him a great review or great game grade. Which
I don't know. I don't know. I didn't see it. Okay, I did not see where he played this great game. I thought Munson played all right. He played all right. He did have like a bad play on like a big run later in the game that I saw, but otherwise, like he was inside out too. Like he was playing outside linebacker.
up on the line of scrimmage and everything. And he was also playing inside linebacker. So that kind of tells you what they think that, he could help do in this defense.
Well, all right. Well, this week they have joint practices with the Atlanta Falcons and a game on Saturday. So I guess they would go a little longer, maybe an entire half. But, I think we came away from this game kind of positive, kind of thinking, all right, most of the team is squared away. Offensive line needs help. They still have time. Who knows if a trade happens? But that's it for this week. We will talk to you in the middle of the week. I guess we will talk about the joint practices. But till then.
Thanks for listening to 3 Yards Per Carry. You can subscribe via iTunes, on Podbean, or your usual podcast provider.